Well, everybody, welcome to Friday. Sorry to have missed you yesterday. I wanted to show my appreciation. Thank you so much for the team and doing such a great job on Thursday, allowing me to be able to fly here to Texas. Today with us, we have Sarah Graham, and Sarah is going to be showing her artwork on ground, I believe. And Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So I think we're going to start by seeing photos. Is that right, Ethel?
Yes, we have a PowerPoint slide.
A PowerPoint presentation, and then Sarah will be talking about her the pictures as we go through them.
Yes. Okay, let's do it. All right. So yeah, thank you, Sarah, for all the images. And we always start by sharing your social media handles so that our friends here could immediately follow you and continue the journey with you. This is Sarah's Facebook account, and this is her Instagram account. Sarah, it would be good if you could share, just maybe share some words about each of the artworks that we will be sharing on screen, beginning with this piece.
Okay. All right. So this one is a portrait of just someone that I knew who modeled for a class that I was taking. And it was one of the first portraits that I painted that kind of moved into this style of many layers that I've been working in for a while. It represents both kind of the way that I like to handle the media, many thin layers that develop a sense of depth and they make the form slowly. And also I have always been very drawn to portraits, even before I was able to draw them well. I wished I could, didn't think I ever would be able to, thought it was amazing when I took my first portrait and figure drawing class and learned how. And I've always just loved to look at people. I'm always thinking about what their lives are like. And so I love painting them for the same reason.
Thank you.
And this is another portrait. This was one of my first portraits on the watercolor ground. So this is watercolor ground applied to a wood panel. And you can kind of see in the texture, there's a vertical pattern that's throughout the painting. And that is from the brush strokes that I used when I was applying the ground. And I really loved that. I wasn't expecting that. And it's one of my favorite things now about using watercolor ground. You don't have to use it that way. You can apply it really thin and sand it down, and it doesn't have to be part of your piece, but I really love that feature. So that's one thing that I love about this portrait. And again, it's just many, many layers and an attempt to feel out depth with the media and also kind of the depth of the person. This one is one of my first larger landscapes. I started out working small. I still work pretty small because I have a young family, and so my studio time is in smaller chunks right now, but this one is a little bit larger. It's 12 by 24. And I think this one I chose to talk about because it really represents well my thought process and kind of the things that are going on in my mind behind the subject matter. Is very kind of boring. It was a dull day. My husband and I were driving somewhere, and we just passed this field, and I made him stop so I could take pictures. And it was very boring. There was no dramatic sunlight. There was no nothing, but it was kind of like wintry. Here in Texas, wintry is not very cold or snowy, but it's just kind of dead. And I was just so intrigued by the challenge of taking something that on the surface was very boring and ordinary and trying to handle it in a way that made you want to keep looking at it and gave it some sort of worth. And I think that's one of the major themes through my work right now is just ordinary things. Since I am a mom with young children, a lot of my life is about ordinary, repetitive things and trying to look at them as each very important and very special. So when I paint my landscapes, that's usually what I'm thinking about. The same with this one. Another thing about this one, I think, is it's not as philosophical as the last one, but it's just a celebration of what watercolor can do. It's very, very watery, and all of the hard edges after pools dry are really showcased, and some of the granulation is showcased, and it's just kind of a celebration of what watercolor is at the heart for me. This is one that I did recently, and I used a limited color palette. Wasn't really even something I consciously set out to do, but I ended up doing that and I loved it. I'm also going to be working on this on a larger scale. This was really, really small study. And so today what I'm going to be demonstrating is, I'm hoping to kind of blow this up and think through it a little bit more on a larger scale. So you'll get to see me work on almost this exact same piece, but bigger today. This is another one, a little bit like the one about with the hay bales in it. It's just a quiet, kind of an ordinary looking scene that I wanted to handle in a way that felt more than ordinary. Another thing I had in mind here when I was painting it is I live in Texas. I haven't always lived here. The heat and I don't mix very well. And when I first moved here a number of years ago, I also just didn't really connect to the landscape that well. I didn't find it beautiful or inspiring. But one of the first things that I was able to connect to when I started to feel more at home here was patches of shadow, relief from the heat, and cows just finding refuge there. So a lot of my landscapes kind of land there because that's a part of Texas that I can relate to, that I feel like I can understand and appreciate.
That's it, the last artwork.
Well, fantastic. Thank you. Those were really interesting. So those are all on watercolor ground.
All except for the first portrait, but because portraits are such a big part of what I like to paint, I haven't been painting them quite as much since starting watercolor ground, but that's not because I don't want to do them on watercolor ground. It's more just because of the chunks of time that I have, since I have a young family right now. So I wanted to share that one just because it still represents what's going on in the back of my mind when I paint. So
Awesome. Sarah, how long does it take you to prime a piece of watercolor ground before you use it?
Well, the actual priming time doesn't take very long at all, but it needs to dry for a while. I usually give it at least 24 hours. And then I often do a couple of layers. It kind of depends. On the smaller panels, I can get away with just one layer, but on the larger panels, I like to have a couple layers because I paint very, very wet, and I want to make sure I've just got enough to take it all. I think you're muted. I can't hear. Are you?
Yeah, I went to mute again. Sorry. So I was talking with Sarah before we started today, and she said she's very open to hear your questions as she's doing her artwork. So please ask questions. I know many of you have questions with regards to the grounds, and since Sarah does a lot of paintings with the ground, has great experience with it, might be a good time to ask that.
Yes, definitely.
So Sarah, anytime you want to start would be fantastic. We'll make sure we give you enough time.
Okay, sure. I might just, I'm going to turn my little overhead light on and see if that helps. Does that make much of a difference, or does it make it worse?
You can see it perfectly fine.
I'm sorry?
You can see it perfectly fine from my viewpoint here.
It's good
Okay.
without the light.
Is it good without?
Yes.
I might just do it without if that works. Just want to make sure that everyone can see it as well as possible. Yeah, it doesn't seem to make a
Fine.
whole lot of difference. Okay,
No.
let me line this up.
That's good.
Can you
Okay.
You left
explain
again.
what watercolor ground is? Because I don't know
Oh,
what it is.
okay. Well, if you're familiar with what gesso is, it's kind
Yeah.
of like gesso, but
Oh,
it takes
okay.
it takes watercolor, so it's a little bit more absorbent and it takes watercolor.
Oh,
So
okay.
you can paint it
Thanks.
on a wood panel. That's what I have here. This is a wood panel that I've coated with the watercolor ground. And now I can paint directly on that now that it's dry.
What made you go to using, I just actually purchased watercolor ground and haven't used it yet, but what made you choose to work on wood versus watercolor paper? Do you like the stability better, or
Watercolor paper is brilliant and there's so many things it can do that nothing else can touch really, but I feel like I just had creative ants in my pants and I just wanted to try something else. And I first tried starting to paint on canvas and thinking if I could, and I made some horrible mistakes and that didn't work very well. And so I just explored until somebody gave me a sample. And I'm not really sure how it all worked out, but anyway, as soon as I discovered there was such a thing, I was sold, and it's been great. I'm really enjoying it.
thank you.
Sarah,
Yes.
I've seen quite a few artists use like a clay panel for doing portraits. Have you ever used those and put the that thing over it?
I missed at the very beginning what you said, a certain type of panel. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, it's like a clay pan, a clay,
Yes,
a
clayboard.
clay board.
Yeah, I have tried that, but I think what I really like about the watercolor ground is that I can put it on myself because I really like the brush strokes, and the clayboard tries to make it really nice and smooth. And that's wonderful if really nice and smooth is the look you're going for, but I really like the texture.
What I'm saying is, have you ever put the paste onto a clay board?
Oh, cover the clayboard up.
Yeah.
I have never done that. It probably would work. It just seems a shame to me because the clayboard is a really special combination that's great to paint on. It's just different. So I would probably just paint it on wood or something and save the clayboard for what it's good at. I'm sure you could do it though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never really thought about trying that. It would be a really good foundation for a painting, both of them together.
Yeah, they probably would. Well, please feel free to keep asking questions as I go. I'm happy to answer questions. I would rather actually answer questions that you all have than just talk about things that maybe are less important to you. So I'm going to get started.
Can I ask how, when you start your ground, I see you've got strokes up and down. Do you also go horizontally, or do you do it both ways?
I don't. You could if that's what you wanted, but then that would give you kind of a crisscross look for sure on the texture, and I don't think that I would want that look, so I haven't done that.
Sarah, do you primarily use white or do you use some of the other colors that they have in the ground?
I most of the time I do use white. Maybe I'll just show you now. I do, let's see, where do I have it? I have it bookmarked in one of my sketchbooks here. I use the transparent sometimes. Here we go, this way. So I did a drawing in a sketchbook and it was just regular paper. And then after I finished the drawing, I thought I would really like to explore it in color. So I just took some transparent ground And I went over that with the transparent ground. And then after it was dry, I went into it with some color. And so it just made the paper able to handle it. And that's probably my favorite way to use transparent. I haven't used, I think you have like a more of like a pearlescent one and some different things. I haven't used any of those, so I don't know about those.
That's good to know about the transparent, that you can see what's underneath it. I never
Yeah,
thought about that.
yeah.
Thank you,
So-
thank you.
Sarah,
Mhm.
how do you feel about actually sketching the image onto the board once it's prepped?
Oh, like this?
Yes.
It depends on the kind of image, but this one, since it's pretty loose, I just went straight on it with pencil, and I can use my eraser on it, and I like to still be able to see pencil marks even through my painting. So
So it's still it's no different to working on normal paper.
it is different. It's especially, I did sand this down so it's not super rough. You just see the texture because of the way the water pools in the little grooves, but it doesn't really disturb the drawing too much, especially just since it's this loose type.
Do you ever transfer your artwork onto?
Yes. Yeah.
onto it? Yeah.
I usually still transfer it from a drawing that I've had in a sketchbook. A lot of times I'll have a drawing in a sketchbook that I want to explore further, and I'll blow it up and transfer it.
Yeah.
Especially with my portrait work, I almost always do a drawing somewhere else so I can get all the kinks out, and then I transfer it onto my either my paper or my panel.
And how long do you, on that particular type of wood, how long do you leave it to dry and it's, ready for working on?
The watercolor ground,
Yes.
I usually give each layer about 24 hours.
Right. Yeah. And it's a couple of layers, is it?
This one is, sometimes I don't always use more than one layer. It just depends on the size of the panel and how much water I think I'm going to use.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. So if y'all are ready, I think I'm going to go into the painting, and I'll just be painting. You can keep asking questions, but I'll just start painting and talk at the same time.
Great.
Can you talk to us about your palette?
My palette, yeah, you want to know what I usually use or what I'm using today, or both?
Both, why not?
Okay.
Nice one.
So what I'm using today is a limited palette. I have quinacridone gold as my yellow. I have alizarin crimson as my red, and I have Payne's gray as my blue. So I have my three primaries that I'm working with, but I just sort of accidentally stumbled upon that combination when I was doing this study on a smaller panel, and I really liked it. So I wanted to explore that. Typically what's on my palette all the time is just a couple of different primaries, versions of each primary, and maybe one or two favorites that I use a lot. But I find that if less is more for me, and if I just really familiar with a few, as long as I have a few primaries there, I can do just about anything. And I learned that tip from my mom, because she also paints watercolor. She told me early on, if I just have the primaries, I might need a couple versions of each, because you can't get pure primaries, but you can go far with that.
Sarah, another question. Sorry to interrupt you.
Oh no, go ahead. That's what I'm
kind
here
of-
for.
What kind of wood do you put your ground on and paint on?
What kind of wood?
Yeah,
I think most of these panels are made of birch, but really what I just buy panels that are made for painting on. They're cradled panels, so they don't require a frame. They stand out a little bit from the wall. But they also look really nice in a frame too, if you want to frame them. And they're
where
made
do you
for
get
artists,
that?
so I just sort of trust them.
And where do you get those?
I've bought them at like brick and mortar stores, like crafts, Michael's, Hobby Lobby.
Okay,
And I've seen them on Amazon. I haven't tried any from Amazon yet, but I plan to, so I hope that works out.
and can you go over your colors once more again, please? Sorry.
Do you want specific colors or just the theory behind it?
No, just what you're going to be using there.
Oh, the ones here? Okay, yeah. I have quinacridone gold as my yellow. I have alizarin crimson here as my red. And I have Payne's gray as my blue. So those are my three primary colors. And I found that they made a really nice painting together before, so I'm gonna see how far I can go again with them.
Sarah, how do you protect your work after it's finished?
I've experimented a lot. I don't know if I'm fully settled, but I think for me, what works best is cold wax medium on top, and it is permanent. Not all watercolor societies acknowledge that. So, if you wanted to participate in a competitive show, I would make sure about the rules before putting that on as your protective layer. But it's archival. It's been used for centuries on a different other medium to protect them. So that's what I have used. I've also tried, there's varnishes you can use, spray varnishes and brush on varnishes. You do need to fix it first with like a spray varnish before brushing, because you'll smudge your painting if you go ahead and just brush something on top. You don't have to do that with the cold wax medium though. I don't know the science behind it, but it doesn't smudge. So it scares me every time, but it does work.
Sarah,
Yes.
I've noticed that you're doing the foreground image first. Is there any reason behind that? Or
Oh, yes. I do get asked that question sometimes. Yeah, I find that just knowing myself, I tend to be too timid with my values if I don't go ahead and get some of my medium and dark tones in quickly. So it is very good advice to start with the background first when you're doing watercolor. But I find that for me, it still works better for me to get a few things in first before I go into the sky. So I did that almost last on the study and it worked well. So I'm gonna see how that works again.
Sarah, what size brush are you using and what kind?
This is a size 12. and it was gifted to me by Lauren McCracken. So I don't actually know a whole lot about it, but it's wonderful. I like to work with large brushes just because they're thirsty and they hold a lot. And other brushes that I really like to use are the Escoda Versatile. Upside down. Here's one of those. They're the brown ones. I like them actually even a little bit better than the Kolinsky ones because they have a bit of bounce to them, and I find just the way that I paint, the bounce is helpful. But I pretty much just like really thirsty round brushes. I also really like these silver black velvet brushes, and they're pretty affordable too as far as good brushes go.
Sarah,
Yes.
if you weren't using a wood panel today, what other surface types would you use paper-wise?
I have always liked the hot press because it does the same things. It allows you to have these pools that form hard edges.
Yeah.
But I've painted on the cold press too, and it has a real velvety, wonderful look too. So I don't even know if I have a favorite. I just think they all have their own strengths. So it just kind of depends on what look you're going for.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, when you have a moment, can you show us just briefly your palette?
Yes,
Please.
actually, now is probably a good moment because some of this needs to dry a little bit before I go in with stuff next to it. So I'm gonna leave it there. Here's my palette. I bought this palette at Hobby Lobby years ago, but I think they still sell it. It has this little rubber ring in it, so you can close it and it won't leak if you have it in your bag.
Very cool.
And I don't know why it took so long for it to be invented, but I love that feature. So yeah, here you have, I have my alizarin crimson and my cadmium red. And then I have a couple of different yellows. Cadmium yellow is another one I really like. I have several greens. I don't use them that much because I have found that I really just like to mix them myself, but I have them here. I have a phthalo blue green shade that I often couple with my French ultramarine here. Sometimes I use the phthalo red shade I have right here too, but if I have the red shade ultramarine blue and then the leaning towards yellow phthalo, then I've got blues that are both temperatures and both sides of the color wheel, so that works for me. I'm not really sure what these are. Sometimes I just put stuff in that maybe I'm trying to sample or experiment with. This is my Payne's gray, and this is my oh, actually I gotta look underneath it because I label it because I always forget. Okay, this is my quinacridone burnt orange, which I've started using now instead of burnt sienna just because it's really, really vibrant. So it's a little bit like burnt sienna, it's just a little cleaner. And here's my quinacridone yellow. So what I'm using today are these three here, this one, and this one here.
Someone's asking the question in the chat. What's the difference between French ultramarine and normal ultramarine? Can anybody advise?
I might not be the best person to answer that. All I know is what I've experienced. I feel like the French ultramarine is a little bit richer and cleaner, but yeah, John might actually be able to answer that one better for you.
Yes, it's the particle size. The French ultramarine, it's the same exact pigment blue 29. The French ultramarine has a larger particle size, so it moves toward the warm or the red. And the ultramarine has a smaller particle size, so it moves toward the cool or the green.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
And John, we've also just pasted in the chat one of the this is one of the frequently asked questions, and John has answered this in not just one session. So we have pasted in the chat a reference, a video actually, and as an answer to that question.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Sarah,
Mhm.
with regards the surface, does it tend to dry as quick as paper or faster, or what are your feelings on that?
Yeah, for me, it dries a lot slower. Well, maybe not a lot. It dries slower than paper. So
Do you find
so
that
I
to be an
have to-
advantage?
it
in the
can
sense
be an
you can
advantage.
work
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
You can work it a bit more. The longer it's wet, the more you can work it.
Yeah, and I find it's also a little more forgiving than paper in that if you do make a mistake, you can go back into it and pull it up a little more easily than paper. It doesn't leave as strong a trace of that, so I like that, and I use that feature sometimes even on purpose.
I know it's not quite the same, but does it have a slight feel of working with UPO paper? That it can lift and be moved
Yeah.
and altered.
I don't know. I've never used UPO paper myself, but the artwork I've seen of people who use it seems like it might have some similarities, just the way the paint seems to behave on there.
Stays on the surface, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Hi, Sarah. This is Rajat here. I'm from India. May I ask you a question?
Yes.
Okay. So normally, whenever you do some painting, I could see there is a pencil shade which you made from the distance. So is it a regular practice for yourself?
I missed a few of those words right at the end. What's the regular practice you're asking about?
That in the background, I could see you have done with a pencil shade. You know,
Oh,
the
some
bushes.
finished paintings?
No. Here. In this particular pencil, I could see there's a bush behind. Behind there is another layer of bush. So do you
I think
make
you said the
shades?
pencil.
Is it with a pencil?
Yeah, pencil.
And do you regularly do that? I mean, this is how the process you do?
I find, yeah, I'm starting to do it more. I didn't used to do it as much, but it helps me to think through the values if I am a little bit more bold with my pencil. And since I kind of like to see the pencil underneath anyway, it doesn't bother me if it shows in my finished painting. I don't do as much of that on portraits, but for something like a landscape, there's a lot of latitude for that.
Hey, great. I appreciate that.
Yes.
This is a new style. Of course, I like that. That's why I asked you. Thank you for replying.
With that in mind, would you ever use either a watercolor pencil, a black one, or a water-soluble graphite pencil, so it kind of bleeds into the paint?
Yeah, actually, sometimes in my sketchbooks, I like to use like a black gel pen because it bleeds.
Right.
And it does make it a darker feel, and messier because when it gets wet, I mean, it just gets everywhere. But it is fun to do that. Yeah. What I'm doing here now is I'm just trying to work a little faster than I usually do. I would normally wait for this dark portion to dry before going in with this yellow behind it, but it's okay if it bleeds a little. gonna use my red for the first time now in some of the shadows, warm them up a bit.
Sarah,
Hmm.
do you use cauliflower in? Do you
Oh
know,
yes, I love to do that.
as a deliberate effect within the painting?
Uh-huh, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
It might be a little too late for that here just now, but we might still get a chance to do that before the time is up. We'll see. I love to do that. I think it's one of the advantages.
Do you ever do flower, botanical?
No, that's not really something I have very much experience in at all. I admire people who can paint flowers, but I think that
It's my arch nemesis.
it takes a lot of patience and I don't know if I'm there yet.
Do you do deliberate lifting as well once the paint's dry?
Sometimes, yeah. That's one thing that the ground allows you to do a little bit more than
Yeah.
paper. And so sometimes I do that. I still find it leaves a trace. You can kind of tell where you've lifted, but I do it sometimes, just not everywhere.
We have a question on Facebook from Kathy Riggs asking, would painting water as a subject be advantaged if the stroke grain of the ground was horizontal?
Oh, I don't know. She might just have to try that one herself. That's an interesting question, though. I don't know. So it does look like I'm still wet enough to have some blooming here. So that's going to be pretty cool. We'll see how that dries. Take some of my purple, bring it down here into this corner.
Sarah, which color is this now? The dark. What color
The
is
dark. Yeah, I'm sorry, it's not quite as obvious on the screen, but what I'm using right now is just the Payne's gray mixed with the alizarin, and there's a touch of the yellow in it too, so it's not a super pure purple. I wish it showed up better. It's always better in person, right?
Sarah,
Yes.
do you ever use any of the Primatech paints that have various different effects in them?
Yes, I have. There's a green one. I'm trying to remember the name. It's on my palette. I'll look.
Green Appetite.
Yes, I think that's it. Serpentine Genuine.
Serpentine Genuine. Yeah.
Yes, but I do. I love how they do the interesting granulating.
Mm. And how do you find the granulate on the surface?
Oh, it's beautiful because it's just like even more texture. So I love that. Yeah. Some of this is right down here.
Is it critical in your painting style to leave little edges of white in it? Or are you a person who likes to get rid of all of those?
Oh, I will probably get rid of most of it, but I will leave some of it. There's a little more white on this piece than I usually start out with, just because I'm trying to paint a little bit faster for the demo, get as far as I can. And so I'm not waiting for things to dry. And if I went right up to it, I would lose those distinctions. I'm gonna go into the background a little bit now to give the foreground some more time to breathe. I have a really light layer back here. Got basically three main values I'm working with: light, middle, and dark. Tried to just keep it very simple with the background coming forward. So I have kind of a cooler gray-green for the background here. And then I'll start warming it up and making it a bit darker as I come forward. And again, I am leaving a bit more white than I normally would, just to keep them from bleeding into each other too much. I think I can probably go back into this foreground too. And this is where I can layer on this for, well, depending on how much studio time I get, but it can take weeks. Usually takes weeks before I've got all the layers in that I want. So I'm just sort of building up building up the form with my values and balancing the temperatures until I get it how I want it.
Sarah,
Mhm.
is it appropriate, or do you ever use splatty technique?
Oh, I think anything is appropriate if it gets the look that you want.
Yeah.
I don't use it very often, but I don't have a particular aversion to it. It just doesn't seem like something I've used lately.
It looks what you're building up to have a feel of a very graphical kind of feeling.
Yeah, I think sometimes I do start out that way. I try to keep it as loose and basic as possible so I don't get, it can just be easy to focus too much on one little place and then you kind of lose the rest of the painting in it. So I try really hard to stay away from that until I get really, really close to the end. What I might do now is I'm going to try this little gun. I have a little, it's a crafting gun. If it's too loud, somebody complain.
It generally switches off.
It's clean.
Can you hear me talk at the same time?
Yeah.
So I didn't used to really use this with paper because paper dries fast enough, but sometimes these pools, they take a long time. So I have this little tool that I use, and it can help me move a little faster through a painting if I don't have a big block of time to work with. So that should get that started pretty good. Now I'm going to go back to these background bushes here. Probably start with the one in the front because it's not touching the other one hardly at all. So that should help me with the controlling the bleeding.
Sarah, could you possibly zoom out a little bit or move it up a little bit?
You could try.
The other way, the other way. Yeah, that's good right there.
Let me get this.
Maybe.
We decided we don't need the light. I can move it. Don't want to distort it too much, but
I think that's perfect right
is
there.
that great? Okay, good.
Yeah, I hope it is for everybody else.
Yes, please don't hesitate to ask me to change things if it helps you to see better. That's the point of a demonstration, is for you to be able to see and learn as much as you can. See how this has dried here. Gonna add something to it, see what it does. Oh, good, yes. It's not bleeding anymore. This is the part that just takes forever. I just do this for days.
Sarah,
Mm-hmm.
layer wise, is there a limit, or is there a limit that you set and say that's it, no more?
I don't really set a limit. Sometimes if I don't have enough watercolor ground, I did have a painting where the wood underneath started warping a little bit because I just
Really?
work so wet. So there was a bit of a limit there, but I just sort of feel it when it's done. I never count the layers. There always just seems to be about 10 more than I think I'm gonna have.
Do you find
Sarah,
that
can
to
you
be
go
the-
over your green mix one more time? In the chat, people are wondering if it's Payne's blue gray or Payne's gray, and if you're mixing that with your Quinn gold to get your greens.
Yeah, I am. I'm using this. Oh, Payne's blue gray. Somebody caught it.
Right.
There you go.
Ah.
Okay. So I'm using that with this one. And yeah, most of the time it's just a straight mix. You know, I'll have a little bit more of one than the other. And then if it's too bright and too green, then I will just add some of this.
Thank you. Your greens are amazing. We're all just giddy over them. Thank you.
Are you painting on a slant or are you painting flat?
I like to paint flat because I love these big pools and I love how I get a hard edge at the end when it dries. So I like to have it flat so it's not running around.
Susan.
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
Mhm.
What's your experience of painting wet into wet on the surface?
Well, wet into wet does a lot of what you see. These really, really messy edges here. That's
Right.
wet into wet. This down here, well, people call them blooms, caterpillars, there's all different names. So it does all that. And then because I have the vertical brush strokes from when I applied the ground, there's a little bit more vertical that's often associated with those blooms. So it is very messy. You know, you have to like the messy.
When you're applying the paint, not the paint, the ground, have you ever thought of putting some kind of material that has a texture on it and then down onto it and then pulling it off so it gives it like
like sand or salt or something?
Not salt. I'm on about the ground, right? While it's wet, putting some sort of gauze over it, and that might give it a multi-directional surface. You know,
Yeah,
that line, and then
I've
pull it
never-
off before it's wet, dry.
yeah, I've never really thought of doing that, but I'm sure it would behave that way. It might be a little messy when you get the wet into wet in the layers, but if you're looking for that, then
It just gives it a random texture rather than that.
the vertical,
one.
yeah.
But then again, that suits the style.
Right, yeah, so the random texture, I think what attracts me to just the one direction is that often I'm looking for an atmosphere that is peaceful and still, and kind of it's interesting because the watercolor medium, especially when I apply it in this way, I have many layers that are chaotic, but in the end you get something that is not chaotic, that seems to belong. And that's an idea that I've been thinking about a lot as I paint and as I filter my life experiences. And so I think that's probably what attracts me to the more peaceful texture as opposed
You
to
do
the
some
random.
of the sky? Can you do some of the sky?
I can, yep.
Your previous comment also brings back fond memories of being a mom of small children. The chaos, but we're doing it with a purpose and it's coming out beautifully.
Yes, I feel like that is a major theme in my artwork because it's a major theme in my life. And isn't that the way it is with art? It's usually what you're thinking about and learning in your life. So yes.
Just tongue in cheek, I've got to tell you to be careful about being attracted to one direction.
Oh, yes.
Never a good look. They're a pop band to everybody else who don't know.
Oh, okay.
Their albums.
I might have been a little bit lost on that reference.
One Direction is supposed to be a big pop band, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm hopelessly out of it with some of those pop things.
You do well.
So what I'm doing now is just plain Payne's gray. And this sky is supposed to be yet another boring, overcast sky. I do love to paint the blue skies. That's something Texas excels at. And I have learned to appreciate that too. But for the sake of the color scheme, which doesn't have any bright blues in it, and I just loved the combination, I am limiting myself. So see how this goes. I'm gonna try and make it pretty quiet. Oh, except for right there.
Now, is
That's
this
okay.
a moment? Is that a moment where you could just get a tissue and like?
Yeah, sometimes I do.
out?
I might if it gets out of control. But I also, it's kind of like, I don't know if any of you do any equestrian, but there was a time when I was a younger and I rode horses a little bit, and that the instructors always used to tell me, work with the horse, not against it. And I feel like watercolor is that way. It has its own mind. I don't know if controlling it is really ever what I try to do. I just try to understand it and work with it.
That linear background almost gives it a feel of when rain's falling down.
Well, I happen to love rain more than almost anything else in the world. So that could be another reason why I like it.
Come to England, we can guarantee you that.
I know, I'm jealous.
Is it raining out there now?
Sarah,
I'll just watch.
Sarah,
Yeah.
what effect does the ground have on your brushes? And does it,
Yeah.
you know, it is, Does it ruin them?
Well, I have only been painting in ground for a few years, so the jury might still be out. I do remember asking someone if it might ruin my brushes and being nervous about that, but then also feeling like getting what I want to get with the effects that I want is kind of my first priority. So if I can buy more affordable brushes and I need to buy more eventually, then it's worth it to me.
Okay.
Yeah. I do know some people who work on clayboard. Now, I don't know them personally. I follow a lot of people on Instagram that I find interesting. And it seems that some of the more acrylic type synthetic brushes are really popular. And they, they're hardier. And they also, I don't know, people don't feel as bad when they die because you can replace them more quickly. But I think also just the way that they behave seems to be a good fit for the people I've seen on Instagram painting like this. So I haven't done too much of it, but when I do pull up if I have to pull something up, I will use that kind of brush to scrub with. I don't use my nice ones. In fact, I have one here. I don't remember where I got this one, but just at a craft store. There we go. It's just a synthetic brush, and I scrub with this one when I want to pull something up. Yeah. Go do some
How
more.
long does it take you to finish a painting normally, Sarah?
How long does it take usually?
Yeah.
Like in hours or just time? Months?
Months? So you can go back to a painting over and over?
I go back, well, yeah. It really just depends on how much time each week I can devote to painting, and that's been a fluid concept for me over just basically since starting my family. I've had seasons where I can only paint a little bit, sometimes where I can only draw and not paint. Right now I'm just painting a couple hours a week. So it can take a really long time.
I like how that's come together. It's really pretty.
Yeah, the beginning part is a really fun part because the first layer or two do go in fast, and then the other layers that get the depth that I like, they take longer.
Sarah, have you ever used a panel like this with ground on it for plein air painting? Or would you
No.
think that it would work?
Yeah, I haven't been plein air painting probably since before, at least before I had children. It's hard to get away from the house for extended periods of time. But I also find that I don't prefer plein air painting. I would probably try harder to do it if it was something that really fed me, but I prefer to work in the studio anyway. I think slowly. I work slowly, so.
How old are your kids?
I have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, both boys.
They started to be interested in art.
Could you repeat that?
Sorry, are they starting to be interested in art and drawing and doing things?
Yes, my 6-year-old, he really likes to color. He has said repeatedly since starting first grade that his favorite extra subject is art. So we'll see.
I always say, from 3 years old, give a kid a pencil and let him have a go.
Yeah.
Get on with it. That's how I
Yeah.
started.
Yeah.
At that age, I was able to do the plein air by taking the kids to a park, letting them play, and then that would give me the freedom. to work.
Yeah. I think right now my 2-year-old, he is still too adventurous for me to do that. I'm
Sure.
but yeah, for sure. They love to be outside, so
Thank you for sharing your limited time with us because I'm really enjoying. I actually was following along with you quickly, and I'm really just starting out with watercolors, so it's a lot of fun to learn different techniques and
oh, well, you're most welcome. And watercolor is just so boundless to me. I've been painting watercolor for years, and I've studied other media, and I've enjoyed them very much. But I'm so far I am not bored with watercolor yet.
Awesome.
I like the
Sarah?
simplicity and the cleanup as well. So I like the colors. And,
Yes, the cleanup is one of cleanup, and it travels well.
Mhm.
It has a lot of practical advantages.
And it's safer being a mom, having these products in the house.
That is one of the reasons I really felt the itch. I wanted to do some oil painting several years ago, but I just said, no, watercolor can do a lot, and I'd rather not have to worry about if the kids can open that door yet, so yeah.
Well,
And
I have
I'm
my
glad I
watercolor.
didn't. I'm glad I didn't do oils at the time, because then that's what made me start wanting to paint watercolor on panels. I wanted to do something different. And so I found a way to do different and stay within the watercolor medium. And I really loved it.
Sarah, thank you for spending time with us today. Would you be able to post that so people can see it when
Oh,
it's
sure.
finished?
Yes,
Okay.
I absolutely will. And I can even post in progress stuff too.
Use
I
them as a
keep up with my
comment.
Instagram really, really well. My Facebook is not where I do my main focusing, but
Sure. Wherever you want to put it's great.
but if
Thank you
want to
so much.
follow me, yeah.
I get to see Sarah again, I think on Monday, or Tuesday.
Yeah,
which
I'm
is good.
excited.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thank you for spending so much time with us today. It was really neat to see both your painting and how you use the watercolor ground. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bye, everybody. Good to see all of you. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.